One thing that became clear to me is what I do next should be squarely focused on AI. Towards the end of that 2 years off, ChatGPT came out in November of 22. And that was a huge aha moment for me, as it was for almost everyone, I think. But for me in particular, because I'd been so focused on AI for so long. And here was all the knowledge of humanity compressed into a large language model. And it was mind-blowing for me. And I realized this is gonna change everything.
Alrighty, hello everyone and welcome to the Deal Maker Show. So today we have an amazing founder. We have a three-peat, founder, very successfully so. He's taken two companies, very far, and now on the next one, he's actually riding, really the wave of AI, and before, the craziness, because he got started a couple of years ago. But again, we're going to be talking about, growing fast, and some of the pains, that causes, now what he's, really learned from that and what he's up to. And then as well as to, some of the things that he did in terms of deal making and how he used AI, very, very early on, and all of the good stuff of building, scaling, financing, and all of the above. So without further ado, let's welcome our guest today, Colin Wiel. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So originally born in LA, but I know that you moved quite a bit growing up. Your dad was a founder, so I'm sure that that was quite the journey. And so tell us, how was life growing up for you?
Yeah, well, I had a great family. Had some turmoil. Went to elementary school in Washington D.C. with a great community. And then went to middle school and high school in Reno, Nevada. That was a culture shock. I was 11 when I moved from Washington, D.C. to Reno. And, I think that was a little bit of a formative experience for me because it was hard. It was, kind of a very redneck culture. And I was coming from a pretty worldly community. And so I didn't fit in very well. I was picked on. I was also small. 11 is a tough age to move anyways. And I think that kind of, gave me some of the grit that I have now and the desire to succeed.
I mean, obviously that helps you with dealing with uncertainty, with, dealing with tough situations. I guess, how do you think that shaped who you are today?
Going through that rough period, especially those first few years there, really, gave me a sense that I've got to be able to rely on myself to be, to be successful. I think I also, maybe it came away with a little chip on my shoulder, like I'm going to show those people that, and I think that's helped motivate me to work hard and be successful.
That's incredible. So I know that also as you were mentioning too, and we alluded to it, your father was an entrepreneur. I guess being able to see his journey and seeing the ups and downs in an indirect way, I guess, how was that also for you?
I think it was good. I mean, we did have downs as well as ups, and we weren't a wealthy family by any means, and but there was a resilience in it. I got to see firsthand, when a company of his went completely bankrupt, and it was kind of tough times for us as a family. But I saw that we were going to be fine, and we were. And so I think that helped give me courage to be able to be an entrepreneur myself.
So obviously in your case, you ended up studying engineering, right? And you went to Berkeley. But after that, it was you went to Boeing, out of all places. And you were involved with AI early on. I mean, way before all this craziness. How did you get, into Boeing and also, into the whole AI thing?
Yeah, so I was a mechanical engineer interested in robotics, automatic control systems, and I hired into this great group at Boeing that was the responsible for R&D for all the automatic control systems on Boeing commercial airplanes. And when I was there, one of the problems that my group was responsible for was anti-lock brakes, and airplanes would sometimes go off the end of an icy runway. And we knew the anti-lock braking system was giving up potential braking. It was 92% efficient. So there's this theoretical additional 8% of efficiency that we could gain. But the algorithm was really hard. Like, the system was highly nonlinear. And so the traditional approach for developing automatic control system algorithms kind of broke down. It's based on linear differential equations. And when you have a nonlinear model, the methodology doesn't work very well. And that was the case. And so I had the idea, and I was only 6 months out of college, but I had the idea of applying AI to this problem, because then you don't need a model of the system, and you can have a highly nonlinear algorithm. And sure enough, with that approach, I was able to get the braking efficiency up to 97%. So it made the airplane stop in a 5% shorter stopping distance.
So obviously, doing that at that age is quite impressive. But, even though, you were doing some good stuff, you even decided to turn page and become an entrepreneur. So what prompted that?
Yeah, so partly it was that experience. I had created something kind of from scratch and realized that it gave me a sense of confidence that I could create something of value. And I sort of always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur, and the first job at Boeing was just sort of, well, if I'm ever going to work at a large company, it might as well be right away out of college, because I'm never going to go back later. But it was time. Like, a big bureaucratic company was not for me. And I left and did independent consulting for a little while, including at Netscape in the early days, really early days of the internet. And then started my first company in 1998. I had become one of the first Java programmers, and then Java emerged as the sort of de facto programming language for e-commerce. And there was a tremendous demand and not very many people who really knew it. And so I started a consulting firm doing e-commerce infrastructure.
Well, I mean, the good news there is that first time at the bat, first hit, you ended up getting a nice outcome. And I guess, what do you think this gave you in terms of visibility into the journey of entrepreneurship, into really getting things all the way to the finish line?
Yeah, it was hooked. I was hooked. So I sold the company in 2000, just as the bubble was bursting of the dot-com boom. And it was I'd say it was a good outcome. It was a single, it wasn't a home run, and it wasn't even a double, but it was still I was quite happy with it. And it was very material for me at that time. And so it gave me, a sense of confidence. I learned a lot. I honestly wasn't very good as an entrepreneur. I looking back, there's so many things I would do differently, but it was great to just get started.
So let's talk about now the next chapters. How do you come across Doug Bryan? How do you guys meet?
Yeah, so Doug Bryan was my co-founder of two companies, both in the real estate tech space. And we met through an investment club that we were in, and it was 2008 when the financial crisis was at full strength. And we both had this idea of buying single-family homes as investment properties at a time when single-family homes were actually causing the financial crisis, and banks couldn't even give them away. Nobody wanted these things. They were considered highly toxic. But we just were having a conversation. We barely knew each other, but we were both part of this investment group. And everyone else in this sort of club thought we were crazy. They thought, why would we possibly want single family homes? But we both saw it clearly and decided to partner up.
So then what happened next?
Yeah, so we started a company called Waypoint Homes, which was the first company to scale single family rental. So we built a tech platform for identifying the best single family rental homes to buy. And this is at a time when most of them were owned, most of the for sale inventory was owned by banks. And a lot of them had boarded up windows. They'd been foreclosed on. The weeds were growing up in the yard. They'd maybe been trashed by the previous owner. And so we could buy these homes really inexpensively, renovate them, and then we were not flipping them, though. The key insight was, hey, if we're going to do all the work buying this home and renovating it. Let's own it for a long time. We know the market's going to come back someday. We don't know when, but we know we can get good rental cash income. And so we grew a portfolio. Before we started, no one had really owned probably more than about 1,000 single family rentals, no single owner. And we bought over 17,000 over the course of a 6-year period.
Wow. Now, as part of that journey, there is not a straight line, no? And for you guys, there was quite the nerve-wracking moment that involved Wells Fargo. What happened there?
We had lined up the first large loan on a portfolio of single-family rental homes where the pool of homes is the collateral. And this was about a $200 million transaction. And we'd been working on it for a long time with Wells Fargo. And we were all the way down to the point where our legal teams had been going back and forth with the red lines, and we'd agreed on the language and we're ready to sign. And we're right there, like left at the altar by Wells Fargo. So we're ready to sign. And at the last minute, they said, we're so sorry, but we're backing out. And the business at this point, we needed to keep buying homes in order to keep all these people employed who were buying and renovating and leasing out these homes. And we were down to only like maybe 6 to 8 weeks left of cash in the bank when Wells Fargo left us at the altar. And we scrambled. We raised a small $30 million fund from individual investors, while at the same time lining up to Citibank, who came in and saved the day for us and ended up doing the same deal that Wells Fargo had walked away from. But that was one of several experiences where, we were on the brink with that company of not making it.
Who do you think you needed to be in that moment? Because, obviously something like that is nerve-wracking. There's a lot of people that depend on you. I'm sure that there was quite a few cold sweat nights. Who do you think you needed to be in that moment, in order to be effective?
Yeah, it was a lot of stress. I think both Doug and I shared this perspective that like, we're going to go all out, whatever it takes in general for this company. And including in that moment, it was like, all right, what are all the things? We're clearing our plate, clearing our social calendars. I was on vacation at the time. I canceled the rest of my family vacation and said, sorry, guys, I have to be full-time on this. And we did everything we figured out what are all the possible things we can do right now.
The company ended up going public and
Yes.
Reached at the peak evaluation of $1 billion. How was that moment when you were ringing the bell? I'm sure that was
It
quite
was
the
so
moment.
great. Yeah, ringing the bell on the New York Stock Exchange was like really a great moment. Especially, I had my kids and my wife at the time on the floor, and Doug had his family, and we had our whole senior management team on the podium with us. And it was just captured so much in one moment. And I think my kids, who were like 9 and 12 at the time, were like, oh, now we get what Dad's been up to. Like, it was a very visceral moment for them as well.
That's amazing. So obviously, incredible outcome. How did you start, especially with Doug, because the next company, Mynd, you started together. How did you guys come across the idea of getting going with Mynd, and what was that moment like when the two of you decided to jump at it again together and to really turn Page into this incredible next chapter?
Yeah, it felt great because first of all, we were super close friends by then, in addition to having been through through war together, but we had this success. We were just come off an IPO. We, then ran it as a public company for a couple of years, and then it merged into something else, and we were sort of free to do our next thing. And we had all this kind of like street cred from coming off this experience. So we had a lot of people who wanted to join us right out of the gate. We had an easy time raising venture capital. We raised a $5.3 million round right away, pre-product, pre-revenue, just like the moment we opened the moment we launched the company. And we probably overhired too many people too quickly. So we started on day one with 12 people, which is a lot, especially before we'd really found product market fit. But we started growing quickly from there and selling our product. But even though it wasn't quite the right product, and we were probably 70 people at the end of year one and maybe 150 people at the end of year two. So we grew really fast. I'm fast forwarding to what might have been your next question, which is what were some mistakes we made. It was really like growing too fast with headcount, and while we were still in a position pre-product market fit where we had to be able to pivot the company quickly. And once you have a lot of people, it's very, very hard to move quickly, to pivot quickly.
So quick question there before we talk about that pivot. I think that I'd like to double click on that. I'm sure that the listeners are wondering, but just for the listeners so that they get it, what ended up being Mynd?
So with Waypoint Homes, we bought and owned these single family rental properties. With Mynd, we wanted to be a third-party service provider, not the owner of any real estate. And so we were a property management company doing both small multifamily buildings like a 20-unit apartment complex and single-family rentals as a service for others. So still an area that we had a lot of knowledge about, but different in that we were not the owners of the real estate.
So talk to us then about the pivot. Because now you have all these people, you've hit the gas too hard, and then you realize that, you guys went a little bit too far too quick. So how was that pivot, and how did you go about executing so that you could, minimize the risk as much as possible?
Yeah, I'd say there's two aspects. One is a real pivot, which we did, which is we started with small multifamily apartment buildings, like 20-unit buildings. And the pivot was to shed that business and just focus on single family homes, which we had not focused on for Mynd yet at that point. And because a 20-unit apartment building is actually very different to manage than 20 single family homes. But we didn't get that until we were deep in it. So that was a big pivot. But then there were just thousands of micro pivots, right? And it's like we're building our own technology and figuring out how our internal platform for managing all this property management. And you just have to try things and make mistakes and be able to move really quickly to figure out the right path. And we just had too many people. So as the technology changed, we were constantly having to retrain big, teams of people, and it became too hard to rapidly iterate.
So what was that moment like when you were like, I think that we hit it? I think that we got the product market fit here.
Well, it was a good outcome today. It's merged with Roofstock, and it's a great company. We've, Mynd raised at 800 million valuation prior to that merger. Roofstock had raised at a 1.9 billion valuation. We merged the two companies. Today it's, a strong going concern, but it hasn't had the growth or impact that Doug and I thought it was going to have at the beginning. It could have been so much more if we hadn't made those mistakes, if we'd been able to really stay small until we had nailed the product market fit and the tech better, and then scaled. And I think it'd be a much, much bigger company today.
Well, definitely something that you've implemented now with your next gig, because after the merger happened, which you were alluding to it with Roofstock, you took 2 years off, to kind of like do some soul searching, or I don't know how you would call it, but to get more energy, right? Because obviously after the crazy years in the startup world, they take a lot from you. But what happened during those 2 years? What did you really learn from yourself and from what you needed to do next?
Yeah, it was a very formative couple of years for me, where I just, I was trying to I create a lot of complexity in my life, weird investment vehicles and boards that I'm on and other things. So I said, all right, I need to clear a lot of this out and have white space in my life so that even I can even think about what I want to do next. And when the time comes, that I'll have capacity and time to be available for that. So I really it took discipline because I'm someone who likes to start things a lot. And I almost, started some different things. And I said, no, I'm not ready yet. So I did a lot of hikes out in nature. I was got into a kind of a Zen state. I think my friends and my girlfriend barely recognized me compared to the person I was before or the person I am again now that I'm in the thick of it again. But it was what I needed and I knew it and I leaned into it, and it was a great experience to really just clear the decks and give it the time that it needed to figure out what I wanted to do next, which is the most fulfilling thing I've ever done.
Well, let's talk about that. At what point does the next chapter become clear to you?
During those 2 years, it became clear to me that I wanted to really return to something totally focused on AI. It was what I had done at Boeing, and I had used it at my various companies, Waypoint and Mynd, but it wasn't the central focus of those companies. And one thing that became clear to me is what I do next should be squarely focused on AI. And then towards the end of that 2 years off, ChatGPT came out in November of 22. And that was a huge aha moment for me, as it was for a lot of, almost everyone, I think. But for me in particular, because I'd been so focused on AI for so long. And here was all the knowledge of humanity compressed into a large language model that could be used for reasoning and natural language processing. And it was mind-blowing for me. And I realized this is going to change everything. And I'm old enough to have lived through a lot of tech paradigm shifts, and I've seen them happen. Even I was in high school when the PC came out, the IBM PC and the Macintosh computer. And then I saw when I was in the workforce, when those started to really become prominent and change how companies operate. And then the internet and then cloud computing. And I've seen these kind of once a decade or so sort of paradigm shifts that really change the playing field. And that's when new startups almost always win the day, when there's a new paradigm. And ChatGPT, for me, told me this is going to be a new paradigm coming. And I decided to go all in on it. So for a few months, I just studied, because I understood AI at a very deep level, but not generative AI. I wanted to understand the large language model in particular and how it works, the transformer architecture, embeddings, the whole that. And so I read all the papers. I went really, really deep into just understanding Gen AI. And then it was during that time that I met my co-founder, August Rosedale, who was the best AI engineer, really the best engineer that I'd ever worked with. And, you don't come across someone like that very often. And I realized, wow, we need to start a company together.
And where did you meet him?
I met him. So there was a group of us in San Francisco who we called ourselves In Reality Lab, and we would meet up every day. We had some free office space available to us. And we all had kind of our own separate projects that we were working on, but we would hang out together and share ideas and collaborate a little bit and sometimes do projects together. And so August was the son of one of my best friends. And he and I started doing a project together, which was autonomous AI agents for coding. So sort of what Devon has become today, but this is 2 full years ago or even more. And we began building AI agents at back then when almost nobody even had heard the term AI agent yet.
That's amazing. So I guess obviously that ended up becoming Qurrent, which is what you guys are pushing now. So what is Qurrent? Tell us, what is Qurrent?
Qurrent is a company focused on AI agents, and basically we build workforces for companies. We custom build them, manage them, host them, and do the kind of the ongoing performance management for companies. So we have a technology platform, a lot of very deep technology that sits on top of the large language model. So we're using the large language models from OpenAI and Anthropic and Google and Meta and others. We're using those, but we have all this technology around orchestrating what these teams of AI agents do together and how they run in a mission critical enterprise fashion, and how they need to sort of continuously evolve, and we need to continuously improve them. And then there's a new model that's emerging that a lot of these top sort of AI agent companies are employing that's different than most of what's come before, which is the engineers of the AI agent companies are custom building solutions for their customers. And it's sort of like, for people familiar with Palantir, it's a similar model where every customer of Palantir would get a custom built application for them, but built by Palantir's engineers. They call them forward deployed engineers. And so that's what a lot of the Sierra AI and Decagon and my company Qurrent, are custom building these solutions for companies, because it's a different, this is a different paradigm. And the kinds of things that AI agents are doing for companies is very different than what SaaS software was before. SaaS software was about screens that humans were using to enter data and click buttons, whereas AI agents are autonomously making decisions and taking actions on behalf of the company without really a human, typically, like a human's not overseeing the decisions on an individual basis. They'll look back and make sure in aggregate that it's headed in the right direction. But these AI agents are like intelligent entities acting on behalf of the company, co-working alongside humans, connecting to the ERP systems and SaaS platforms of the company, and doing entire roles in the business. And therefore, by its nature, every company is unique, and the way that they want these decisions made and actions taken by these agents is going to be unique for each company. And so that's where this model of companies kind of deeply partnering with their AI agent partner companies, in our case, us, we have a deep partnership with each one of our customers, and we're working very closely with them to identify exactly what these workflows are that we're going to automate, and then, building out these AI agent systems, and then allowing them to see, observe how they're behaving, what are they doing, look back in time and see what's every decision or action that an agent's ever made. So if you have to investigate something, it's all there, easy to find. And then this sort of continuous improvement process where it's like AI agents sort of exhibit behavior almost like a human, very different than what software was in the past, where it was very deterministic and limited in scope. This is much broader in scope and probabilistic, not deterministic. So it's more like the behavior of a human. And just like with humans, we have, continuous process improvement, like Six Sigma or Kaizen, continuous improvement processes. It's the same way with AI agents. You might, in development, you might get it to perform well enough to go into production, but it's not over at that point. You want to just rapidly, continuously iterate and improve the performance of the agents. That's what Qurrent does.
What is the, obviously you're at the forefront of this, but what would you say is the craziest thing that we're going to be able to see soon that those agents are able to do?
I mean, we're seeing it every day, and it is crazy. It's magic. It actually feels like magic to me. We're doing like AI agent systems for companies where we have AI agents negotiating large transactions with humans completely autonomously, like binding transactions. So in this case, in particular, it's selling cars. We'll have 10 dealerships simultaneously negotiating over the price of a car when an individual wants to sell their car. That's, AI agents are negotiating financial transactions with humans. That's pretty crazy. I think so much, like right now with AI agents, we're taking major roles in companies of repetitive tasks, but it can be complex, cognitive tasks, but something that's repetitive, and you can design a team of AI agents to do that workflow consistently. Where I think it's heading is the whole company will be largely controlled by these AI agent systems where, the planning, the ordering of inventory, that you can imagine a day when really the vast majority of the decisions in a company are entirely made by AI agents.
That's unbelievable. Now, when it comes to the financing, you guys have been very careful, right? On obviously, what you learned with Mynd, you're like, okay, we're gonna take it easy now. And with Qurrent, you guys have done a small raise. So how did you go about the transactional piece here with Qurrent, and also choosing the investors that you have decided to choose early on?
We're lucky in that, I have a good network of friends and people who believe in me. So we've raised $4 million so far of angel investor money, and we have a few small VC checks in there, but nothing. But it's really angel investors, and they're individuals who also have value to contribute beyond just their capital. So introductions to potential customers or advice that's really valuable. And that's been enough because we already have meaningful revenue. We're 20 people, so we are growing slowly. We're, after my experience with Mynd, where we were probably 150 people by the time we were 2 years old, I didn't want to make that mistake. So we've stayed small, but we are starting to grow now pretty fast because we're having because we feel like we did achieve product market fit. But yeah, so that's what we've done with capital, and just the longer term needs of capital for this business are smaller. Our financial model has us, needing less than $10 million more total ever before we're just,
Wow.
Growing quite large just based on cash flow. So I think that's true in general with companies right now, AI companies in particular, because we're using AI agents. Part of our workforce is AI agents that we've built for ourselves. And you just can get so much more done with so few people that, like, I raised 200 million. Doug and I raised 200 million for our last company, Mynd. We're looking at maybe not ever needing more than $20 million at most for Qurrent to become even bigger than Mynd.
That's unbelievable. I mean, that's now the world that we're living into. So I guess, Colin, one question here that comes to mind is obviously these investors, employees, that you have now, they're betting all on a vision, right? And I guess talking about that vision, if you were to go to sleep tonight, Colin, and you wake up in a world where the vision of Qurrent is fully realized, what does that world look like?
Well, every company has AI entities co-working alongside humans. They're talking together. They're communicating. The AI agents are sometimes talking with customers, using all the systems alongside humans. And humans are elevated to really focus on more human tasks and jobs, like building relationships, and innovating. And AI is doing more and more all the time of the mundane work.
That's amazing. So talking about the future here, I want to talk about the past real quick, and doing so with a lens of reflection. I'm putting you in a time machine right now, okay, Colin? So be ready for the ride. So I'm bringing you back in time to that moment where you were about to give your notice at Boeing. And you have the opportunity of showing up right there as you're coming out of the office building and stopping that younger Colin and giving that younger Colin one piece of advice before launching a business, what would that be and why? Given what you know now, you're now on your fourth company. So there's a lot of lessons learned.
There's a lot there. I would say, one regret that I have is having not stayed totally focused on AI. And it was kind of hard, it wasn't a big industry for a long time, but I wish I had stayed deeper in AI the whole time. So that would be one piece of advice, is really stay totally immersed in AI. I would say work with the people and doing the projects that are going to be the most fun and make you the most happy. And that should be the primary driver. And if you do that, wealth will follow, but you'll have the best time.
That's amazing. Well, in the end, when you have the best time, you get all the energy.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. So, Colin, for the people that are listening that would love to reach out and say hi, what is the best way for them to do so?
Yeah, you can email me, colin@qurrent.ai. Love to hear from anyone who's interested.
Amazing. Well, easy. Well, Colin, thank you so much for being on the Dealmaker Show today. It has been an absolute honor to have you with us.
Thank you, Alejandro. I appreciate it.